Hello and welcome to HPA-Global Insights, where we'll be interviewing experts from the dietary, supplement, nutritional ingredient, and overall natural health food industry. Please like, subscribe, turn on that little notification bell, and comment below. Now on with the show. Hi, welcome to the show. Today we're going to take another deep dive into China's social selling or e-commerce. Hitting a new platform that most people don't know about or never heard of called Pinduoduo. And today to talk about this with me is my friend Brian Negley. He just recently moved back from China like myself. And Brian is a founding member and consultant for a company called EarlyData. Brian, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the welcome. It's nice to be here. And great to talk to you. Hoping things are going well down in Texas. I've relocated to Portland. Things are going very well here. We've had a bit of a hot spell, unusual, but
definitely.
Other than that, really settling in well.
Let's dive into some intros here. So a little bit about yourself. I know you've been in the market intelligence business for a long time, and then also spent a good part of your life in not just China, but Asia.
Right. So I have been in market intelligence / research for quite a long time. So I was with Nielsen Marketing Research for over 20 years. I want to say 23 altogether. I think that's about right.
Wow.
And so I started with them in Japan. Worked for them in Japan for a few years, and then they sent me to Indonesia. So I was in Indonesia for about almost 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went back. They sent me back to Japan for a couple of years, down to Taiwan, and then over to mainland China. And of all those stints, mainland China was far and away the longest. Did a number of things with them in China. And then about 5 years ago, I joined EarlyData. EarlyData is a digital marketing intelligence agency. We collect data from all kinds of digital sites. E-commerce is mostly what we do, but we also do things like menu and pharmacy, a bit of social media, things of that nature. So everything we collect is off digital sites, bring it in, clean it, analyze it, and put it into readable formats and analyses for clients.
Awesome. So that's where I met you, and we worked together a little bit on some of the association conferences where you gave some speeches and presentations in Shanghai, which is interesting. And you guys dive into areas that some other companies don't necessarily dive into. And that's the one I really want to talk about today is the Pinduoduo, which is a social media selling site. I mean, it's compared to Groupon or group buying, basically. So let's talk, because I think most people probably never heard of it, or if they have, they don't really know what it's about. So what, the basics of Pinduoduo, what is that like?
Right. So Pinduoduo is relative to, say, Alibaba and Jingdong, a latecomer. I think they started in 2015, and sort of their niche, or not a niche, they've grown pretty fast, but they got in as what you mentioned as a sort of a social e-commerce site, which means when you actually go on the site, one is they really encourage you. In fact, I don't even know if you can buy off the website. You can look them up on a website. You can just type in Pinduoduo and it'll take you there, but they want you to download the app. So I think just about everything, if not everything, is on the app. And then once you're on the app, the interface is different. It feeds you a lot of different social stuff. It could be, recommendations. If they know you, they might put stuff that your friends are talking about, or certain KOLs are talking about. So it's not the typical, say, Jingdong and Alibaba, just here's a search bar and just search for what you want. So it's more interactive in that way. And then games came in later. So that was one of their differentiating features. But probably the most important one is their targeting. They really targeted lower tier cities
Mhm.
So for those that are not familiar with Chinese city tiers, there's the key cities, top cities: Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou. I think Shenzhen is now a key
Yeah,
city.
Shenzhen, Beijing.
Shenzhen, Beijing, yeah. Then you get tier one, which are all the provincial capitals, and tier two, three, et cetera, all the way down to rural. So they really sort of start at the bottom up. And even today, I think it's about 70% of their consumers are from tier three and below, which is really completely opposite to what you'd find on a typical consumer
Mm.
profile consumption of say Alibaba and Jingdong. That's changed recently. They've kind of gone after more of the top tier consumers lately, and Alibaba and Jingdong have kind of gone the other way recently. But having said that, that was kind of their entry. Their two distinguishing features: social e-commerce, as a social e-commerce site, A, and then B as a site for lower tier consumers.
Yeah, we were talking last time about this. My perception, having lived in Shanghai with the majority of my friends and extended family all living in first tier cities, most of my friends and colleagues, didn't really have a very good perception of Pinduoduo because it was targeting, those, way out tier 5, 6, rural areas, and starting at the bottom, like you said, and going up. So there was many stories about them selling knockoffs, like selling for example, a Samsung TV for like a ridiculously low price, but when you get it, the TV it's not spelled Samsung correctly. It's got an extra G or some other, and so there was this really bad perception about it in the beginning, but I understand that they've really cleaned that up more so, and have really, as you mentioned, are moving towards those second, third, second, first tier cities in terms of their target.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. I think they have cleaned it up a lot. I still understand that they have a problem with fakes.
Mm-hmm.
Because they deal with a whole slew of manufacturers, and I don't, they can't control, because the price point's still really important for them. So I don't think they've been able to fully control what kind of goes in and gets marketed on their site. So I still hear rumors of fake merchandise, but I do think they have cleaned that up over the years.
Yeah, and I think that's just something very difficult to move away from across all the platforms. It's quite hard to really be 100% clean of that, since there's just
I don't think they're the only ones that have that issue, but certainly that's what you hear a lot about them.
Yeah. So like all social selling or e-commerce platforms like Tmall and JD and all these guys, we all have these categories, and that's where you guys, like as a market intelligence agency, dive into these and pull numbers. So what you did, you pulled together some great information targeting or using those key phrases about health food or supplements that are being sold on Pinduoduo. So let's dive into some of the numbers and show, just kind of the growth, the sales, all these wonderful things.
Right. So just as background to explain what we do for your users. So I mentioned that, we collect data off a bunch of digital sites, and that includes e-commerce sites, do various things with it. And there's various services that we have. And one of the services we have is, we call it category monitoring, which means we go on certain sites every month and we pull the same information. And those sites, it varies a bit by category. Health supplements is kind of our bread and butter, so we do more sites for health supplements than any other category. But it's the Alibaba site, so Taobao, Tmall, and then Tmall we split domestic and international. Same thing for Jingdong and Jingdong worldwide. Kaola. We also do VIP, Suning, Amazon, or what's left of Amazon in China. And then we also do Pinduoduo for all of that for health supplements. So every month we go out and collect it, and then we present it back to clients. So clients be able to see, hey, what's the category size month by month, is the category growing or not growing? And then sort of underneath that hood, so to speak, what's happening, how are different manufacturers doing, gaining share, losing share, which brands are winning and losing, and then we can break that down into items that are really moving up and down. And also,
and what categories are popular? What's
right,
you know,
what
because this
categories are
thing
popular.
changes. Yeah.
Exactly. And then even within, getting within a category, speaking specifically of health supplements, again, we can also break it down by ingredients and functions. Hey, these ingredients are really moving fast, or these functions, kind of in whatever those functions might be, these are moving fast or moving slow, so clients can kind of get a different look at that. So that's what we do, for a number of categories, including health supplements. So just kind of, thinking about Pinduoduo, because we kind of mentioned at the outset, it's a real low priced. One of the biggest distinguishing factors, it's really low priced in terms of their offer, and that's one of the distinguishing factors between, say, them and the bigger platforms like the Alibaba sites in Tindong. So just looked at some.
Let's
Sure,
before you jump into there, let's just kind of add on to the explanation of Pinduoduo with some slides you presented. I'll throw it up on the screen now, but there is just a visual of what it looks like. You had mentioned, there's, like Tmall, for example. If you go in there, it's almost like a search engine. People will go in there and say, I want to buy calcium or whatever, and they'll just type it in, and then it'll just throw all the calciums at you, depending on, who's the best seller and all these things. Whereas Pinduoduo, like you had mentioned earlier, it kind of feeds you, especially after the algorithm gets to know who you are and what you like. It feeds things to you, like here's the things you may like. And then at the bottom, which makes this platform different than the other ones, this is where the group buying aspect comes in. And I'll put up a visual of that you provided, where it shows at the bottom, there's a pink box and a red box. If you want to buy it by yourself, you pay a little bit higher price. But if you've got 10 plus friends or whatever, and you all buy it together, then the price goes down. And that's something that's really separated Pinduoduo from everyone else. And, that's very interesting.
Yeah, that group buy function is interesting. Yeah, I mean, something else is Pinduoduo heavily skews toward females. I think 75% of their registered users are females, which is, I think the other more conventional platforms, I think they're close to 50-50. I think Jingdong leans more toward male because they're big in electronics, and Tmall the opposite because they have a lot of fashion, so they lend more toward females. But that female skew of Pinduoduo is really high, again at 75%. I think a big part of that is the group buying function.
Let's look at sales volume and sales value. I know you have a couple of great pie charts to show just overall.
Sure.
And these numbers are specific to health, dietary supplements or health food products.
Yeah, right. So I'll go through, just talk through a couple of the slides that I gave you. So I wanted to also contrast Pinduoduo's contribution. So if you look at health supplements as a total pie, so to speak, and then you figure out, what percent of sales does Tmall, what percent of sales does Tmall Hong Kong, all those platforms that I mentioned at the beginning account for on a sales value basis. And sales value is basically the revenue, or, the unit times the price, the sales value of a category. If we call that 100, Pinduoduo is relatively small in terms of their contribution or their share on a sales value basis. It's under 4, it's about 3.6. Those numbers are a little bit small. So it's relatively small on a sales value basis. And, so the Ali platforms and JD combined probably are about 75% or 80. If we look at a sales unit or a sales volume, again, keeping in mind what we said before, that Pinduoduo does a lot of lower priced items. If we look at that same information on a sales volume basis, Pinduoduo is the number 2 platform. They do 15.5% of the sales volume. They're right behind Tmall. So just in terms of pure volume, they're a pretty big contributor. Again, with the caveat that they sell things at a much lower price. Either they're getting lower priced items, or they tend to have smaller items that are at a lower price point, because that's what's going to appeal to their consumers.
So on this pie chart, just to clarify for viewers that aren't aware. So Tmall, Tmall HK, and
Hmm.
also on the top there, there's the one with the K, so Kala. Kala was acquired by Alibaba.
Right.
So those three would represent, if you want to put that in the category of Alibaba's group or whatever, those three would be one kind of,
Yeah, actually, you would throw so actually, that's a good point.
and
You
Taobao
would
as well.
you throw
Four, yeah,
Taobao as well. Yeah.
yes,
So
exactly. So
so
that
you
makes
see,
Alibaba has a much bigger chunk if you add on all their platforms together
for
under
sure,
one.
for sure. I think like if you put all the Alibaba and Jingdong sites, because Jingdong's going to have JD, and that's the domestic
Mm.
Jingdong platform, and then JD Worldwide is the Tmall Hong Kong equivalent, the cross-border site. If you put the Alibaba and the Jingdong sites together, you're probably talking 75-80% of the
Mm.
volume. Everyone else has just got a sliver,
And
at
for
least on a sales value basis. On sales value basis, yeah.
and then for people that don't know, why does Tmall have two slots, or why does JD have two slots, one having HK? So from my understanding, it's basically that's the cross-border portion where they're putting a server in Hong Kong outside of mainland China, so they can
Yep.
function as a cross-border platform where you don't have to register products and you don't have to get all the approvals from the Chinese government.
Yep.
And that's
That's exactly it. Yeah. So we
yeah.
split Jingdong and Tmall that way. Kaola is another cross-border site.
Hmm.
Um, Actually, we talked about it before. Pinduoduo does have some cross-border products. We haven't actually split that out, but some of that Pinduoduo number will have some cross-border sites. We'll have to do that. But that's exactly right. What you just said. The Tmall Hong Kong and the Jingdong Global are basically, yep, they're sold out. They're
Hmm.
sold outside of mainland China, so therefore you don't have to register. The product mix tends to be quite different, as you know. Um, and in this particular category, health supplements, cross-border is a big contributor. You won't see, if you just look at like the Tmall Hong Kong and the Jingdong Worldwide and the Kala numbers, they're if you add all those up, cross-borders, probably 30-40%, if not more, of this category.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's one of the highest, if not the highest, of all the other categories that we monitor, things like hair care and cosmetics and things like that. You'll see some cross-border contribution, but not to the extent that you will in health supplements.
Yeah, and that's mostly just due to the regulatory situation where it's very expensive to get registration approval to sell on a domestic.com like
Yeah.
Tmall.com.
Mm.
And that's most of our members are kind of operating in that way.
Mm.
They're selling dietary supplements to China through cross border, so they don't have to go through that registration process.
Mm.
So that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. But yeah,
Yeah.
with what you're showing so far, Pinduoduo, definitely you're going to have a cross border cutout for them at some point, because they're
Yep.
just they're growing
Right.
so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and so basically those couple of charts basically say in terms of their contribution on a sales value basis, they're pretty small. They're under 5%. But if you just look at the volume, the units that go through Pinduoduo, they're pretty significant. It's about 15% of the category, so it's not small. Now, another thing I was curious about, because health supplements as a category has been growing for as long as we've been monitoring it. It's really been a high growth category, growing faster than most of our categories. For a while, it was growing like 40, 50, 60%. So the recent year-to-date number I've got for the category is growing about a little over 20%, health supplements as a category. And that's going to vary by platform. Pinduoduo, the growth rate on just Pinduoduo and health supplements, it's more than double that 20% rate. It's about 45, 50%, depending on whether you're looking at it a volume or value basis. So, even though it's relatively small, it's outgrowing the category, and therefore it's gaining share. So it's becoming a more important contributor as time goes on.
Yeah, and so much so that I mentioned earlier before we started this, there was some news that came out, when Alibaba had the CEO had spoken about their direction for the future. And this is, with all the tech stuff going on in China and Alibaba getting hit with all kinds of fines and whatnot, eyes are on Alibaba. Like, what are they doing? What's happening? How are they going to continue to grow and all this stuff? It was interesting how they really addressed that they're really going to start targeting, what Pinduoduo did in the beginning, and targeting those outlying areas in China, and to compete directly with Pinduoduo, because they're growing so quickly in that way. And just economically, for those that don't know, I think, of course, the more affluent people with money are located in those big cities, Shanghai, Beijing, etc. But in terms of cost of living and just regular, a family having expendable income to pay and play, those outlying tiers, typically when you hit the third tier, fourth tier, they have a lot more money in general to throw around, because the cost of living is so much less out in those areas compared to living in Shanghai. Like a 20-year-old living in Shanghai compared to a 20-year-old living, in a city, like a third tier city, is very different in terms of costs and what, how much money they have to throw around. So I think Pinduoduo attacking or going after that population, going back, reverse, heading towards Shanghai from the other direction, is very kind of ingenious.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I think it also shows the increase just in the number of people using e-commerce in lower tier cities to buy. I think it was last year, the number of registered buyers on Pinduoduo surpassed that of Alibaba. Now the spend per buyer is lower. So I mean, Tmall, Alibaba still does more business than Pinduoduo, but the actual number of registered users on Pinduoduo surpassed that of Tmall, which is interesting. Yeah. So anyway, Pinduoduo is growing. It's growing faster than the category. It's in health supplements, and it's growing faster than Tmall and Jingdong. And I played around, and I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, when we do this, we kind of first we get the whole category, and we can look at the category growth and how fast category is growing, and then break that down by platform, which platforms are growing faster than the others. Something else I looked at was ingredients. What are the fastest growing ingredients on Pinduoduo and the category in general, and how to look at that. Probiotics, and Jeff, we talked about it. Probiotics is a real hot topic for China, and no surprise, probiotics is driving the growth on Pinduoduo that I just mentioned. But the growth rate is super high. It's over 400% on year to date. So that's January through June. As a year to date, the growth is 450% of probiotic, anything that have probiotic as an ingredient, which is super fast. Now it's growing fast for everybody else. It's growing 70%. So it's growing for everybody. But in terms of what's hot on Pinduoduo, probiotic products are just super hot, 450%. And it makes up, probiotic products, ingredient products make up about 17% of sales on Pinduoduo, which is about twice as much as what you'd find for everybody else. So it's just kind of shows you how consumers are behaving on that platform. And again, a lot of these are lower tier consumers. Probiotics is something that's selling everywhere, particularly in lower tier cities, as evidenced by these sales numbers on Pinduoduo.
Yeah, just looking at the chart here, and just even the bottom rung you got here was vitamin C. It's like 40% growth. So I mean, it's just the fish oil is something that's a mainstay of our industry, and it's been around for decades. So it's fairly stable. It doesn't really fluctuate too much, and it's a popular ingredient, but it doesn't, we're also over 110, 100% there. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, iron is 50%, whereas it's half of that on all the other platforms. So yeah, these established ingredients are really moving and really taking off, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I'll just briefly mention, we also classify items into functions, so we can look at things like cholesterol health and anti-cancer functions within, see how those are growing as well. So just looking at the same thing, Pinduoduo versus everybody else, digestive health, which a lot of that's going to be overlapped with probiotics, but products that have a digestive health function are growing 150% on Pinduoduo, super fast. And they're growing on all the others, but at a much lower rate, a little over 40%. So over 3 times as fast on Pinduoduo. So, I don't know if that's counterintuitive enough. You would think, oh, people in lower tier cities maybe live a more relaxed life. They might not have the same need for these kind of products, but apparently not so. I mean, if digestive health is growing that fast, somebody's got some digestive health problems. And other things that are growing, sleep aids, anti-fatigue, things having to do with blood pressure. All of those are growing really fast, at 80, 90, 100% levels.
Well, two health areas of overall health that are global problems, but in China they're exacerbated just by the number of people. Is cardiovascular issues and diabetes. They're both huge in China, and they're both represented on this chart here. The top up there, you have cholesterol health is over 400%.
Yeah, small base, but yeah.
And then on the bottom is blood pressure, over 80%. Those both would tie into cardiovascular, and diabetes. Blood sugar is also in there too. So that makes a lot of sense.
It would also might just show you for your listeners, again, because we are dealing mainly with lower tier consumers on Pinduoduo, incidence of these products might be much lower in lower tier cities than upper tier cities. So a lot of these might be first time buyers or very infrequent buyers who are buying more regularly these kind of products. Whereas, in the top tier cities, a lot of the people who buy these things may have been buying them for many, many years. And so you won't see the growth there. But whatever the reasons, that all these kind of things are really, really growing fast on Pinduoduo. And again, very representative of lower tier consumers.
And then you had the slide about we had mentioned earlier about the money, which is interesting. And then the growth rate of those lower priced items compared to higher priced items.
Right. Another dive I took at it is, because it's apparent that Pinduoduo sells a lot of lower priced items. So items that are priced below 100 RMB account for about 90% of Pinduoduo sales, 88 to be precise. But when, again, at the outset, we said, hey, Pinduoduo is growing fastest. So what's growing fastest? Interestingly, it's the 100 to 200 priced items and the 200 to 500 priced items that are actually growing faster, just in terms of pure growth rate. So as a percent of what Pinduoduo sells, it's still relatively small. Like 100 to 200 priced items are just 10% of what they sell. But those are growing at 70%. Whereas the 0 to 100 priced items are growing at 50%. Okay, so one thing this means is that, and we kind of alluded to it before, is Pinduoduo is moving into more established brands that might have a higher price point, and consumers are responding to that. So they're still basically a low price platform, but slowly but surely they're moving into higher price point, more established brand kind of items.
Yeah, so we're looking at, you mentioned 80, I'm just looking over here, 88% of the sales. So that is 100 renminbi or less, which would equate to about, what would that be, about $15 or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so $15, $16 or below would be the bulk. So that's pretty cheap. And then we're looking at the growth rate is something upwards of maybe $80 or less in that kind of price point, which is growing quite quickly. Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, I mean,
so at some point, Alibaba and Pinduoduo are going to meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah,
they're going in opposite directions, trying to combat each other. It's like, the battlefield, they're going to meet, somewhere in the third tier city, I guess, or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, well, your comments about Alibaba at the beginning were interesting. I mean, I think they do, and probably because of what Pinduoduo has done, they do recognize lower tier cities as an opportunity,
Mm,
and so it's interesting that they're going to focus more there.
yeah, exactly. Um, and then you got a couple other
Oh yeah, I was
slides.
and this is out of more of my own curiosity, like, are the top brands or the top manufacturers, do they really differ by Pinduoduo and say, I just looked at Tmall and Jingdong.
Mhm.
A lot of the brands are the same, like Buy Health is is the top manufacturer on Pinduoduo. They're the top on Tmall. I'm adding the domestic and the cross border, and
Mhm.
they're the number 2 on Jingdong. So that's not different. Bios Time, which is basically this Swiss brand, they're a top brand. I mean, most of the brands most of the manufacturers in the top 10, not all of them, most of them in Pinduoduo and Tmall and Jingdong are the same.
Mm.
Um, Comba was an exception. That's why I looked at those last 2 products. But one big difference, if you just like look at and I just focused on Buy Health and Bios Time because they're kind of 1 and 2 in the market, right? If you look at the average price of an item of those top 2 manufacturers, Buy Health and Bios Time, if you look at the average price of an item sold on Pinduoduo versus Tmall versus Jingdong, much lower on Pinduoduo. Like the average Buy Health item price on Pinduoduo is 61.
Wow.
Yeah, and Tmall and JD is mid to high 100s, 154 to be precise on Tmall, 193 on Jingdong. So same manufacturer, but they're probably selling smaller sizes. It could be a cheaper product. I would think mainly for the most
Yeah.
part, it's just going to be much smaller sizes with much smaller content. And
Yeah,
the
it
same
could.
thing for
Yeah, it could be.
Bios Time.
Yeah, it could be that what consumers are choosing to buy on Pinduoduo are those lower priced items from those companies compared to maybe someone spending more money on a Buy Health product that costs more money.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So
but it is definitely interesting, and that whole group buying function is something unique. Now, so at the end, I think they did 2 unique things. They got the group buying function, which no one
right.
else is really doing, and
Yeah.
they also started out in the outlying tier cities, working their way towards the top, which is something we've talked to companies about for years in terms of when you enter China, a lot of people were like, got to jump into Shanghai and Beijing, and why would you want to do that when there's less competition and more potential for growth out, just hitting those third tier cities, or going out to a city that's not as um, you know I can't say it's big because even those cities are huge. I mean, some of
Oh,
those
sure. Oh,
third
yeah, yeah,
tier
sure.
cities are just huge numbers with people. So
Yeah, no, for
yeah,
sure.
that's a good strategy, really.
Yeah, no, I think Pinduoduo, depending on the category and the product, but it's definitely a good option, or if you're already on one of Tmall or Jingdong, instead of going to the other one and basically getting a similar audience, Pinduoduo is a good option. Or, like you said, it could be a great entrance, because you'll have it, again, depending on the makeup of your brand and your price points and all that, but you might have a lot less direct competition on a site like Pinduoduo. But certainly as a mix in this category, Pinduoduo, because you'll get a different consumer mix, and because it's growing so much faster at the moment anyway than the other platforms, it's definitely worth consideration for sure.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a place to think about taking the mix of your product. So if you're a brand that's got 30, 40 products or 20 products or even 10 products, maybe looking at the top 3 or 4 lowest priced products you have and throwing them at Pinduoduo, and
Absolutely.
fishing, getting those lower priced items on there and keeping the higher priced items more towards JD seems to be the kind of top tier in terms of price point.
Right.
That would be a good strategy as well. And then,
Yeah.
once you've got some of those loyal consumers buying your lower price products, they might say, "Ooh, what else they got?" And then move over and start buying some higher price stuff from JD or Tmall.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. We're
Okay.
over 30 minutes now, but
Okay.
there's just so much great information you had to share.
Well,
And
hopefully it was of interest.
oh, definitely. It's very interesting to me, and I'm sure all the members, because they're operating over in China. This is great intel. Look forward to doing some future videos. Maybe we can find some
Sure.
other areas that are interesting.
Yep. Be happy to do that.
Present.
Yep.
So take care.
All right. Well,
During
thank you.
this
You too,
crazy
Jeff.
time.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for participating.
My pleasure.
Insights always appreciated from you. It's awesome stuff. Brian, take care, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Yep.
You take
Bye.
care too. Okay. Bye now.
Thank you for tuning in to HPA Global Insights. Please like, subscribe, and share with your colleagues. Any questions or suggestions, email us at info@uschinahpa.org. This channel is operated by US China Health Products Association, which is a nonprofit organization. Please consider joining the association and supporting its global endeavors. Your support is very much appreciated. Until next time, take care.